welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters, with your questers Josh and Dan. I'm Dan.
I'm Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things Thanatological and Golemical Part 2, as we cover more of the Horrorspawn and constructs. So if you have any questions for us about anything, please contact us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
So this week, we are continuing our exploration of horror constructs. We are diving into some of the constructs that are included in the Earthdawn 4th Edition Companion. These generally are more powerful, nastier, and more original content in the sense that there is not as much in this book that is reprints or new stat blocks for previously existing creatures. There's a lot more original stuff that came out of mostly Morgan's brain with regards to this stuff. We're probably not going to cover all of them this week because there are a lot of them in here. This is actually really cool. I like what they did here. While they are kind of more powerful and generally speaking higher circle, because the Companion is a higher circle book, this does give you the opportunity to have a little bit more variety in terms of your opposition when it comes to horrors and the things that they make. Some of these can suit reasonably well as primary opposition in maybe slightly lower powered games, whereas they might be minions or whatever in higher circle, like higher journeyman into warden and master tier challenges.
Yeah. So we're not going to attack these in any other fashion other than straight from the first, alphabetically speaking, because it's just easier than jumping around throughout the book and editing out all the dead space while we flip pages and things. So since a lot of these are new, there's not going to be quite as much development history retrospective like we had in the last episode and talking about the Jehuthra and Spectral Dancer and stuff like that. We're just going to kind of talk about these different things, how they are cool, notable abilities, and just kind of go on through, and we'll see how many we can fit in. Good uses for them. Because again, these are all horror constructs, so they should be the minions that the party actually has to fight before they get to the big bad, right? Kinda?
Or they can serve as a sort of big bad in their own right.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on the type of situation that you want to throw against your group.
Absolutely. So let's start with something, of course, just creepy and wrong. The Boneless. These are just the flesh fused together from victims. And it kind of drags itself along by its arms and legs, moaning with dozens
quote-unquote
of mouths.
Arms and legs, kind of like just tentacle.
Squishy bits.
Yeah.
And, it moans along with like dozens of mouths all over it. So that's just, that's the stuff of nightmares. Thanks, Morgan. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just a big blob of flesh with a lot of mouths that just kind of slumps along and makes like an eerie chorus of moans as it is the smushed together, boneless, hence the name, remains, fleshy remains of victims. This is just a big, nasty, creepy abomination kind of thing. It's tough. It's kind of geared as a 7th circle challenge.
Opponent, yeah.
It has a lot of health. Relatively speaking, it doesn't have a lot of armor for an entity of its challenge level. It doesn't even necessarily have particularly high defense ratings, but it does have a lot of attacks.
I find it hilarious that it has an unarmed attack for something that has just limbs sticking out of it. Sorry, it's punny.
It also does not have a limit on how many bite attacks it can make. Its attack and damage steps are actually pretty reasonable.
Oh, yeah.
The big nasty thing that it can do, if it gets a really good success on its attack, it can use one of its sort of tendrils, one of its arms, to grab the victim and drag it underneath its mass, basically crushing them.
Suffocating, yeah.
Not requiring an action, it just does damage every round until the victim is freed. The also other notable thing that it has is the terror power, which is a horror power that is similar to the Nethermancer's Frightened Talent, which basically imposes penalties on the victim, which means it's actually going to be that much tougher to defeat because your step numbers are potentially lower. It also has a long range, and its tendrils can serve as entangling weapons. So it's just like a big, nasty, yucky fight.
Well, and this is also something, this is like a fight of attrition, because the unconsciousness and death rating, not to give too many spoilers out, are in the triple digits.
Yeah, it's in the low triple digits.
Yeah.
There's a lot to deal with here. I mean, it's probably something that as a single target against a group is probably not going to last too long if you're going against an upper journeyman group, because you'll have multiple attacks and, thread items and stuff like that can help kind of get past things. But it's one of those where, because of its reach, because of the secondary abilities it can have, it can still ruin somebody's day.
Yeah, totally. So, pass. The Stuff of Nightmares. Again, thank you, Morgan. Good idea. So onto the Brute. And this is just kind of like Earthdawn's version of, I think, Frankenstein's not a bad way to put this.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it's similar to... It fills a similar kind of niche as the Boneless. It is not quite as imposing. It is not quite as large.
Yeah.
But this is just generally the idea, rather than just being a sort of shapeless protoplasmic mass of flesh, the Brute actually is different body parts stuck together in some kind of mockery of name-giver form.
Yeah.
So it will still have like 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, that kind of thing, but they will be from different individuals. And so for the challenges in this book, it is actually on the lower end. It's only like a 5th circle challenge, but it's undead. It's a horror construct. It's basically just kind of a big, strong, you don't throw a single one of these at a group. Mm-hmm. Maybe as a challenge against a upper novice tier group, it might serve as an interesting capstone. Yeah. But generally, you want to throw multiples of these. This is what you start to get into when you're dealing with a horror that is really corrupting and shaping their victims, as opposed to just kind of animating them.
Yeah.
But also just to give relatively simple physical combat, tougher but physical opposition for higher circle groups, because a pack of ghouls or even some cadaver men are not as likely to be a challenge for a group of 6th, 7th, 8th circle adepts.
Yeah.
Brutes are kind of what you upgrade to at that point. They've got a couple of maneuvers where they can spend extra successes on their attacks to either harry or knock down opponents, but they're otherwise relatively big, strong, tough opposition.
Fair. No. I was going to point out on the Boneless, because the difference between the Boneless and the Brute, we played a game a number of years ago, my friends and I, where we liked the random idea of where you might possibly hit somebody with an arrow, or if your sword went astray, just to help tell the story. So we had a hit locations chart, basically on a D10. 1 is head, 2 is neck, so forth and so on. You kind of figure out the rest as you go along there. The Boneless, you can't use that hit location chart on. It's just a blob of unskinned flesh, essentially. Whereas the Brute, you still can, as Josh said, it's 2 arms, 2 legs, torso, head, knock yourself out. As we go down the rest of this list today, we're going to see exactly how useless that hit location chart is going to be.
Yeah.
So, the Boneless can't use it. The Brute, you can. But to Josh's point, this is a tough, slow-moving Frankenstein's monster construct of pieced together thing. And the cool thing about this is this could be made up of the party that came right before yours. And so it could be people that were familiar, and you can notice parts about them and go, oh, I remember that. I recognize that tattoo in that one guy's arm. This is even creepier than just, unskinned flesh rolling toward me.
Yeah. These are kind of like tougher cadaver men without the personality remains and without the frenzy.
Oh, yeah.
They're just bigger and stronger and tougher than the cadaver men would be.
Fair enough. I like that. So a little tweak, a little Earthdawn wrinkle to that whole thing there. Let's get on to the Deathless Reaver. This is a troll-size, 6-armed skeleton. And lest you think that it being troll-sized makes it slow. Haha, no. These suckers are quick.
Yeah, these are basically big skeletal constructs with multiple arms that horrors make as kind of powerful guardians or powerful minions. They are an 8th circle challenge. They've got, again, like triple-digit death rating.
No unconsciousness.
High initiative, high defense ratings, high physical stats, multiple attacks, multiple actions per round.
Well, it's got 6 arms and carries 6 broadswords. Yeah.
They get bonuses, like if they are attacking if they are acting earlier in the round than their target, they gain bonuses to attack. Like all undead, they are immune to fear and have resist pain.
Yeah.
They do have a weakness, and because they are made of bone, people attacking them with blunt weapons actually gain an additional success on their attack test when they hit, so they are automatically causing extra damage. These are giant multi-armed undead is like skeletons is kind of an iconic fantasy image.
Yeah.
And this is just the Earthdawn version of that.
Yeah.
They've got multiple arms. They've got swords in each of them.
And these are constructed from heroes and other undead people. So the more powerful they were in life, the more that magic is imbued in their skeleton, and the more powerful they are in this new undead form. So I love the last sentence. Those who can make these undead constructs are always looking for notable battles and heroes' graves with which to make the Deathless Reavers from.
Yeah. Again, this is another mainly physical enemy. It is a physical combat challenge because of its high initiative and its high attack and damage steps. Again, it's an 8th circle challenge with multiple actions. This could very well serve as a good capstone in a sort of journeyman adventure or whatever.
Yeah. If you think Prince Goro, 4 arms from Mortal Kombat was tough, try 6 arms, skeletons, and 6 blades with 4 attacks per turn. Just saying. That's, yeah. But yes, absolutely, the Deathless Reavers are not to be trifled with. So on to the Dil'kava. These are only found in the city of Utrecht. And so these are a whole different thing. So you can't really just throw them in anywhere. If it's outside of Utrecht, you got to have a reason for it to be there.
In the lore, there is reference to a horror called Agoista, I think is Agoastia. I'm sorry.
Dil'kava? No. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, later in that paragraph, which is a crystal entity, a powerful crystal entity that was at least partially responsible for the ultimate destruction of Utrecht. Mm-hmm. It is much larger than your typical crystal entity, and it occupies a major section of the capital of Utrecht. And what the Dil'kava is the cadaver men that this horror makes. It is a sort of troll cadaver man that has some added extra stuff.
Living crystal kind of from the horror bonded into it. Yeah. And so it is a tougher cadaver man with extra armor, basically. It's got the same rage powers. It's got the same sort of stuff. Yeah.
It's sort of an example of how you could customize or alter an existing creature to make it special or unique or flavored in line with what is going on.
Yeah.
This is a crystal entity that animates the dead. Let's make these special in some way. Okay, well, they're going to be trolls. It's a more powerful horror, so there'll be more powerful cadaver men, and it'll stick living crystal in them because that's cool. Yeah. That's what this is. Otherwise, it's bigger, tougher cadaver man with hardened armor because of the crystal. Like, that's basically what it is.
And only found in...
And it's cool because it connects to, like, sort of existing lore a little bit.
That was going to be my point, is it's there for a reason that it's different, because it's only found in this one place created by this one horror. So it's a specialized version of. So if you're playing, like, the Earthdawn version of The Amazing Race, you wake up and don't know where you are, and you fight one of these off, you go, okay, I know I'm in Utrecht now, because that was different than I'm used to seeing. But there's that. On to something I think is a very unique Earthdawn flavor, again, for a horror construct, a dreamer. This is made up of 2 more. obsidimen that are merged together into one form.
Yeah. So there is a horror. We haven't talked about the actual horrors yet, but there is a horror that is called a Kreescra. Physically, it is a small, not particularly imposing or challenging opponent when it comes to physical combat. If you can corner it and like get it into a situation where you can fight it, you can probably kill it without too much trouble. It is, however, pretty skilled at stealth, and what it does is it sneaks up and sort of invades and manipulates your dreams. What it does is it, like broadly speaking, affects your ability to sort of recover from damage, and it kind of feeds off of that exhaustion and pain and everything that comes from that. The Dreamer is a construct that is the result of a Kreescra working on a pair of merged obsidimen, because obsidimen that were not, for whatever reason, able to return to their life rock before the Scourge, some of them entered a sort of dream state collectively where they sort of did not have the protection of their life rock, and with enough time and effort, basically the Kreescra turned them into this, where they're kind of like this fused pair of obsidimen, kind of a big two-headed obsidiman-looking thing.
Like the worst version of conjoined twins.
Yeah. Physically, they're kind of tough because they are obsidimen, but the stuff that's weird about them is they've got all these kind of dreamlike powers and illusory abilities and stuff like that, because they are still, in a sense, trapped within the nightmares that the Kreescra has inflicted on them. And so they can inflict waking nightmares on their enemies. They create illusions and other kind of dreamlike imagery. They do mental attacks to cause mystic damage to their target. So while in one sense, like they are kind of physically imposing, their weirdness comes from all of like the dream powers and mental powers and stuff like that that goes along with it. And they can like force knockdowns with some of their abilities, and there's some other cool stuff. So like these are kind of a weird thing to throw. And again, this is a construct that was created from sort of existing lore in the game and putting a bunch of kind of like weird illusion and dream-like powers on top of them.
It's a nice combination because you have the physically imposing form, which is also creepy.
Yeah, it is still physically imposing because they've got like a damage step of 23 with their unarmed strikes, but that is the least of your concerns, ultimately, when they can also do a step 14 mystic attack right directly into your brain as a kind of like psychic assault, or they can create an illusory horror that also causes damage similar to the Astral Maw spell or something like that.
And then wounding him is a bitch because the wound threshold is 20 something. So that's
they're difficult to put down. But I think the strength, rather than relying on them as a physical enemy, like they've got enough physical stuff going on as it is, but playing into the mental torment and nightmare logic and stuff like that they have when it comes to the reason they are the way they are, to play up that in terms of the encounter that you have with them, and going potentially for some real like surreal stuff or body horror, if that's okay with your group, and stuff like that, where you can really like mess with and warp the character's perception of reality, getting that kind of stuff on top of a reasonably tough physical opponent.
Absolutely. Like
as
that,
well.
That was my point is usually some things are very physical and you can attack them mentally, or something is very powerful mentally and you can attack them physically. This is a combination of both. So, and it's an 8th circle opponent. That's nothing to sneeze at.
No, that's not a pushover. It also is sort of immune to being harried, and without the use of like magical talents or whatever, can't be surprised or blindsided because it's got 2 heads and it's sort of awareness of the area as a result.
Yeah, I love the power eyes in the back of their head, and I actually could see that because a horror would actually put that on the opposite side of the head, just because for the creep factor. You'd have to. I would. I'd find a visual for that. That's just me. On to the Fire Wraith. And this is a living fire appearing as a name giver because it's a corrupted fire spirit. And these suckers carry flaming whips. So in case you needed something else just as the visual of a cool factor for your opponent, I like finding pictures of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty cool. We had the Storm Wraith last time, which was sort of a corrupted air elemental. The Fire Wraith is a corrupted fire elemental. They are most commonly found near and on Death's Sea, and also like any other place where there would be volcanic activity. They're tougher than Storm Wraiths and more dangerous. The Storm Wraiths have kind of the lightning ability, but the Fire Wraiths have fire and fire whips. They gain bonuses based on the wounds that their target is suffering. They can set their targets on fire. Think of the worst things that you could do with an evil fire elemental, and that's what you've got here.
And again, it's a 9th circle opponent, so this is not a slouch.
As written here, it is a very challenging opponent. You could certainly scale down the numbers a little bit to make it a little bit less dangerous, but the things that it can do is pretty nasty.
You're already having a fire spirit and then corrupting it by a horror, so you're adding a factor of what? I don't know, you're tripling it essentially.
Whatever.
Come on. That's just bad enough as it is. Next up is the Flesh Beast. We've had enough. We've had skeletons. We've had just flesh. We've had brutes, which is mixed up body parts. This is an undead name giver with an animal's head.
Yeah. Now these guys are weak. These are Circle 1
minions.
These are supposed to be like sort of masked minions.
Overwhelm them with numbers of these things just for the creep factor.
They don't have much in the way of particular powers. They've got a weaker version of the fury that cadaver men get. They can also reduce the target's wound threshold, spending additional successes on their attack to reduce wound threshold instead of dealing extra damage, basically by using the tusks or teeth or whatever part of their animal head. But basically these are animated undead where a horror to like invoke upset and revulsion in their victims basically takes the dead bodies of other victims and sticks an animal head on it and sends them out in waves to just wreck stuff.
So
these are actually a really kind of good low-level introductory horror thing that doesn't quite have the level of danger that the stock cadaver man has. It's got a different kind of creep factor. Again, a lot of body horror in the stuff that we're dealing with here.
This reminds me of the original the 1981 Swamp Thing movie, where one of the bad guys was turned into like more of a pig person thing. Walking swine on 2 legs. Anyway, so this is what I got from that. Am I remembering that wrong?
I don't know whether you're remembering that wrong because I don't remember that movie well enough, but I'm recalling, I think in the movie Time Bandits.
Oh, wow.
The evil guy in that changed some of the Time Bandits, the dwarf characters in that into pigs, or at one point it also was running around with a pig's head kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not much to say about this. Again, it's like a low-powered sort of undead construct that is creepy because it's got an animal's head instead of being like a normal
I could just see
person.
If the game master throws one in there somewhere just as you happen to see this, that should intrigue the players to begin to follow the mystery you're intending to lay out for them, because this is something quite obvious. Something is wrong in that area. Just saying. The Pestilent Ghoul.
Okay, this is cool. This is sort of another example, the way that the Dil'kava was a sort of variant cadaver men. The Pestilent Ghoul is a sort of variant of the ghoul, but there's a backstory connected with this. This is not actually the result of a horror. This is the result of a nethermancer trying to figure out, he was an orc nethermancer and was trying to figure out how to extend the natural lifespan of orcs, and was getting to the end of his own life, and out of desperation developed a ritual that essentially turned him into the first pestilent ghoul. But this is a ghoul, like we talked about last time, so it's got the same kind of venom and whatnot, but it also has disease. It's got disease, it's got stealthy strides, so it kind of sneaks around. But yeah, it's basically a slightly more powerful ghoul that has disease on top of venom. If the victim succumbs to the disease, they become a pestilent ghoul. This is the classic zombie plague. People get bit and they turn into it, which is not normally the case that happens with ghouls or cadaver men. This is the case where, yes, you get bit, you get infected. If the infection kills you, you rise as one of these
I could
things.
also see that enough pestilence would be surrounding them like Pigpen from the Peanuts cartoons, but that's just me. That's how I would describe them, at least. But yeah, pestilent ghouls are nasty. Fourth circle, decent opposition, but at least I would put more story behind them than just, here's a random encounter. I would put a reason for the pestilent ghoul to exist.
That's why sort of there's the backstory there. A lot of what you can do with the stuff in these is look at the story that's presented and look at them as examples of how you could take maybe some classic Earthdawn creatures, put a little twist on them, and create a story around how they are the way they are. The idea of a name giver, particularly a nethermancer, doing some kind of ill-advised ritual in the belief that it might protect them or work out to their benefit in some way. It happens in Earthdawn all the time. I mean, look at the Bloodwood. That is a sort of strong theme when you're dealing with horrors and the desperation that they sometimes bring. And the pestilent ghoul is an example of how can we make a ghoul? What kind of story can we write around this variant ghoul? And then you've got the added problem of it doing the classic zombie apocalypse thing where those who are bitten by it and become infected by the disease rise as one later on, and that can spread the disease themselves. And so rooting out a nest of these could be a pretty difficult challenge, in addition to the logistics involved with needing to potentially treat the disease and the resources that would be required to kind of put a stop to it. There's a lot going on with this just from this one creature that you could potentially spin from it.
Some bestiaries don't actually have a backstory in other games, and I know that. So I appreciate Morgan's work and everybody else who contributed to this, that there's almost always a really good story behind it, or there's more depth in meaning than just a stat block with a paragraph that described as such. No, there's a reason these were made. There's a story behind it. There's a certain horror attached to it, or whatever the case may be, or it's location based. Still, that location has a story behind it as well, like the Dil'kava. So I appreciate all the backstory and paragraphs leading up to the description. So always fun. On to the Gloomwing. This is a
Mothman.
So these horror constructs are known as Gloomwings take the form of a name giver with large, dark, feathered wings sprouting from their back. They also have long, spindly fingers. They are gaunt with blisters and boils all over. So, a hot date on a Saturday night. For no one at all.
In silhouette, in dim light, they sort of appear angelic, although angels are not a thing that is really in Earthdawn. That's an image that we would recognize, but they are very powerful constructs that cause intense feelings of sadness and helplessness and despair on anyone who beholds them. They are physically kind of tough. They're not super difficult. Physically, they are a little bit less imposing than the Boneless, for example. I mean, they've got decent physical stats because they are a Warden tier challenge. But the issues that they have is they have a free fear-inflicting aura of dejection that spreads around them, and those infected, suffer penalties as a result. They get bonuses to attack and damage when their target has wounds. They can also fly. And they can also convert psychological pain to actual physical damage, liquefying their victims' internal organs and causing them to weep blood. Anyone who is affected by their aura suffers a wound and takes damage equal to their wound threshold. Armor does not reduce it. They've got a bunch of nasty sort of secondary effects that make fighting them physically a little bit more difficult.
These have enough of a backstory. You could almost create an entire adventure based upon them, because Gloomwings are often created from name givers who have a passionate desire to fly or for freedom. So these can be, made out of orcs. These can be made out of trolls. These can be made out of any species you want. Really, if you have a Tiskrang with feathered wings, that's just odd enough to work, because, you're mixing, But these are a 10th circle opponent, so they are not to be trifled with either, because they are...
Yeah, and certainly one of these things against a group of roughly equivalent adepts is going to be a difficult encounter, but these are absolutely going to wreck the day of most people that they're going to run into.
If you're not prepared for this, you will not come out of this winning. Or at least you'll be bleeding heavily, and one of you out of 5 might survive this if you're not prepared. So, don't take the Gloomwing lightly. And by all means, like I said, you can make a story based upon the whole thing about figuring out who that person was beforehand, before they were corrupted by the Gloomwing. So, write the story first. I think that would be an awesome way to approach using one of them, because I wouldn't want to see 2 at the same time. At least if I were playing in that adventure. Anyway, we're still in the G's. Can you believe this? On to the Grotesque. It's an aptly named horror construct.
More formless body horror.
These are just a writhing mass of tentacles and teeth. And that's just hideous on its own. Just that mass of teeth.
If anybody is familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, there is a creature called the Gibbering Mouther. And this is
spin on it.
Reminiscent of that creature in one sense. The Gibbering Mouther has like eyes and mouths and stuff, and is kind of like a protoplasmic mass. The Grotesque doesn't really have any eyes, but it's got a bunch of toothy maws in amongst a writhing mass of constantly shifting tentacles and whatnot. Again, like kind of very John Carpenter's The Thing vibes a little bit from it, but without the impersonation duplication stuff.
Yeah, if you do a quick internet search on monsters made entirely of teeth, go with that. That'll give you nightmares right then and there. So that is the Grotesque. And again, it's a 9th circle challenge as well. So it's not just one of those, hey, we're here just to, throw something odd at you. This is the confounding appearance power, harvesting energy, immune to fear, long tentacles. So it's tentacles made of flesh and teeth. So it's just one of those, mouths everywhere.
So the 2 big things that stand out for the Grotesque, I mean, aside from its tough physical stats, because it does have reasonably high physical stats, are the confounding appearance. Anybody who is attacking it, because of its shifting appearance and constantly roiling mass of whatever, you suffer penalties just simply trying to attack it. There is a way to kind of get around that, and it requires a sufficient awareness and or astral sensing test in order to do that. Awareness for physical and astral for mystic penalties. So you kind of need to look at it closely in order to avoid the penalties, and there's a test involved in doing that. And then the malleable form, it has a potential of, because it can shift its shape so rapidly, it can, as a simple action, make a test, and if the test is successful, they blindside their opponent because like a tentacle comes out of nowhere and smacks them, or like a mouth appears where they didn't see one and it bites them. So that's nasty. And then if they get enough successes on that test, they can use terror, which they have as an ability as well. Again, that fear-inflicting ability. They can use, it's normally a standard action, but if they get enough successes on malleable form, then they can use it as a simple action. So inflicting terror in addition to the physical attack. Yeah. These are supposed to be rare. These are only able to be created under particular circumstances. This is something where a horror has a lair or has created one of these for a specific purpose in a specific place, rather than being a more sort of free form or free roaming entity that's just kind of out there causing grief.
The hidden gem of the powers it has no limit on the number of bite attacks it can make in a round because of all the teeth.
Yeah, similar to the Boneless, which has mouths everywhere and does not have a limit on how many bite attacks it can make. The same thing goes for the Grotesque. The Grotesque is sort of the next tier up from the Boneless. It's just got some extra additional roiling, shapeless mass terror stuff.
So, yeah, it is Grotesque. Okay, so last episode we gave you 10 horror constructs. We're going to give you 11 because we're in the companion, because we can, and we had time for it. So, last for today, the Care Crawler. This is a 6-armed name giver. It's all arms.
6 arms and no legs.
4 arms up top, 2 legs down below, or 2 arms down below, appearing as legs, usually made with the upper body of a name giver, and a third pair of arms sprouts under the center of the body, so they crawl along on all 6 limbs as if they were insects. Very fast, particularly suited to layering in cares and abandoned mines. So these are first seen in breached cares near the kingdom of Scytha, created by the particularly cruel horrors led in by the few cares that opened their doors early, trying to escape the curse that had befallen them. So these are nasty and 6th circle, so nice for a little mid-tier, mid-level adventuring party.
They've got a high initiative. They've got a pretty high movement rate. Their climbing movement rate is as fast as their regular movement rate. Movement rate 14, whether climbing or just going along the ground. So they are as fast as elves. They've got reasonable stats. Again, like these things probably become a problem when you are getting them in groups, which is where you are likely to encounter them. And they've also got ambush and stealthy stride and fury. So they've got that little like cadaver man oomph in there as well. Yeah, they're creepy and nasty. And again, like more body horror, more horrors corrupting and twisting name givers in ways that are just unsettling and weird.
They bring the creepitude.
Yeah. They have an ability, if they score well on an attack test, to actually like sort of jump onto their target's back and force a knockdown test. Again, just ew. Undead.
Blech. Undead, body mutilation, and mismatched body parts, just enough for the creep factor. So all of these are more of the horror movie genre in Earthdawn than just the, I have a big bad creature that looks a little different. These look grotesquely different on purpose. And
many of these are largely physical challenges that are there to enhance the mood or tone of a particular area. Like there is a kind of different vibe that you would get from having a care that is infested with a bunch of care crawlers, as opposed to if you are encountering a Boneless or stuff like that. All of these are like weird kind of unsettling, different flavors of horror movie monster thing with their own abilities and stuff. And some of them have strong backstories connected with them that are all worthwhile.
The backstories, I think, are the part to lean on as to what maybe you want to create an adventure around them, or a 2-parter where this is, the tantalizing bit and then the big horrors at the end or something along those lines. But again, these are just not something you draw on willy-nilly. These are the horror constructs, and so they're there for a reason. They're there in the specific location, or they're created by a specific horror, so there's not just something to think about, we'll throw something nasty at you. These have to be there kind of for reasons in the storyline, my thought. So Any final thoughts? Any favorites? Any least favorites? You ever had a chance to use some of these? Face some of these?
I have not had a chance to use some of these. It's possible that we might have faced some of these in the Legends game in the most recent episodes that were released, I think, where we're descending back into the care. I don't really have any favorites in these. I think they're all cool in their own way.
Fair. Since there are no final thoughts, folks, enjoy these. Or don't enjoy these if you're facing them. Game Masters, go to town, use them appropriately, and good luck all of you players out there who have to face these. Tell us how you defeated them, and exactly how long the battle took, and initiatives, and so forth and so on. So until next time, and we will be getting to more horror constructs in the third volume of this series. Go fight some Spawn for your legend.
Good night, everybody. Sweet dreams.